Now, what kind of shape and form for the reality that we would like to create, or the imagination that we would like to prescribe, I think this is a matter of dialogue and debate. But I can tell you that what we have been doing during the last 2 decades is not taking us anywhere.
Do you think we need new leadership on both sides in order to explore these new avenues?
Absolutely. I think visionary leadership is a key issue on any struggle or any cause. And without having this kind of leadership, we may continue acting on issues related to immediacy. And I hate immediacy of politics. Politicians who maneuver because of tomorrow, not because of the next generation. People who try to achieve something in front of a camera, now and today, not for the sake of creating stability in the future. I think this kind of leadership, on both sides, has not been able to produce and to generate visionary solutions. This is why when I think of someone like Nelson Mandela, for example, and the way that he was looking forward to the next generation and the future of his country, ignoring the immediate pressure on him to gain immediate gains, to satisfy emotionalities here and there, I think he was successful. And I think our leaders are not.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you mentioned in your speech about the idea that you felt statehood in the Middle East was something that was imposed? Can you elaborate a little bit more about what you discussed in your speech?
What I was saying is that this nation, which calls itself the Arab world, or the Arab nation, was not given the chance to develop naturally and organically. I think the borders were artificial, imposed on us by colonial powers for the sake of colonial interests. We were not consulted on what kind of borders we are going to see after the First World War. This is why legitimacy from the public towards certain kind of entities and fragmentation in the Arab world was not really full. So what I view the future of the Arab Spring is beginning of a great debate on where are we heading, all of us together. None of us could continue to thrive politically or prosperous economically if we do not have proper integration within the parameters 22 states that we are talking about. So this is why we are in front of the following model: nation state. The nation state emerged in Turkey, a nation that created a state. Iran, a nation that has a state. France is a nation with a state, and Germany is the same. But in the Arab world, a nation that has 22 states. So there is something missing. And this something, I'm not here calling to destroy the borders, because I know this is difficult to do with the current political systems that we have. But I would say that we need to reach maximum economic and political integration, whereby we could support each other in transforming these territorial entities or polities into something solid that might really create stability and prosperity.
Welcome back to the show. For those of you just joining us, we're speaking with the former Director General of the Al Jazeera Network, a man who took it from a station to a global network. Mr. Kamfar is now on to other things as the co-founder of the Sharak Forum. In the third segment of our interview tonight, Mr. Kamfar shared some strong opinions about nuclear Iran and the US election.
I do want to ask you a couple of questions about the U.S. elections, but since we have you here, one question about Iran. Is the Iranian nuclear threat a real threat, or is it something that is sort of perceived?
I think the nuclear threat of Iran is very much exaggerated. And I do think that the Western powers, and Israel in particular, have exaggerated this threat to a large extent, and I do not share the same concern. Neither most of the Arab world. I don't think the Arabs really think of the nuclear capabilities of Iran as a major threat, while Israel is proven to have hundreds of nuclear weapons ready. So we're talking about Iran going into the direction of acquiring technology that might in the future be used for military purposes. But what about a state like Israel that has already this kind of facilities? So when the Arabs actually are discussing this issue, and they listen to the Western discourse and the Israeli discourse on Iran, they will raise this question. Why there is double standards in talking about, okay, if you would like this Middle East to be free from nuclear weapons, fantastic. Let us do it, but do it for everyone. Now, we have problems with Iran in the region, not related to the nuclear issues and not related to the West and the Israeli worries about Iran. It is related to the way that Iran is handling the domestic politics of Iraq, and Iran interfering in the issues of Syria, and the way that Iran is projecting its dominance in the Gulf. And that should be dealt with through dialogue and debate about the future, because you should remember that Iran is a state that will continue to exist as a neighbor and integral component of the Middle East. We are going to continue to live with Iran as neighbors. So the only solution is to find a way of balancing our interests in the region in order to stabilize the relationship between the Arabs and Iran, not to fight against each other. So a war from the West or Israel against Iran is not going to help anyone. It's going to complicate the reality in the Middle East. It's going to create new dynamics and new forces that might not be helpful neither for democracy or the future of stability in the Middle East and the world.
Do you think there's a possibility that Israel will proceed with an attack even without U.S. backing?
I don't think that the Israelis can really do that without U.S. backing. I do think that the Israelis are pressing for U.S. backing, and I might be concerned that maybe the Americans after the elections could do something regarding this issue. But again, I really feel that an attack against Iran is going to be a waste of time of those who are going to attack. Because whatever they are going to do, eventually they might delay a process. But they also might unleash new reality that might be very fatal against the interest of the West and against the Israelis. So the decision makers who decide that should really think for a long time about what they are doing.
Moving a little bit to the U.S. before we let you go, obviously the elections are going forward. Do you believe that U.S., I don't know if I want to call it intervention, but is there a role for the U.S. in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process if there ever is to be one again?
Frankly speaking, the general attitude in the Arab world is as following. The Americans have been, supporting the Israelis without trying to look at the interests of the Palestinians or the Arabs. We feel there is a huge hypocrisy from the American administrations regarding this issue of Palestine in particular, and that was maybe the most important source of frustration regarding the American foreign policy in the Middle East.
I'm sorry, you said hypocrisy, is it?
Yes.
In what way?
Hypocrisy in a way that you are defending the interests of one party while not being able to see the point of view of the other party. That was the major issue. When the Americans came to the region, in the case of Iraq, they were claiming that they are there in order to establish democracy. But of course, in the Palestinian case, we have not seen the same standards implemented. Of course, that turned also to be a disaster in Iraq anyway. So I do argue that once the Americans decide to respect the decision of the people in the region and try to embrace this proper transformation that we see, democratic transformation in Egypt and Tunisia and Libya and many other countries, that might give them some kind of leverage in their relationship with Arabs and try to fix this historical insult that we feel deep down from the Western policies towards us.
Did it not improve from, say, the Bush administration to the Obama administration? Did nothing improve?
I would say that it is less hostile. George Bush administration cannot be, described but the worst policy that was taken towards this region. Their mistake in regarding to Afghanistan and to Iraq and many other cases in the region were really very severe. Now, Obama tried his best. He came to the Arab world. He promised a new paradigm of thinking. But frankly, if you go now to the streets of Cairo, the streets of Damascus, wherever you would like to go in the Middle East and ask the people, do they really feel that Obama promises were actualized? No. I think people are disappointed by the Obama administration, and they feel that it has maybe reduced the rhetoric and increased the positive aspect of it, but practically speaking, nothing of what he promised was achieved.
What kinds of things are sort of at the top of the priority? Like what kinds of things did he promise?
For example, Obama said that we don't want to see settlements in the West Bank. Settlements continue, and he had to back off. Obama was talking about, taking the Arab world perspective into consideration. We have not seen that. So I think pragmatism of the American administration and the mechanisms within America itself and the relationship with the Congress, for example, and the relationship within the lobbies of America itself has dictated certain foreign policy that no one is capable of departing from. And that is worrying, because the Americans right now has great chance to really rebalance their relationship with the Arab world. They have new leadership that is representative of the masses, democratically elected. And this new leadership is not going to be dealt with like what Hosni Mubarak and Zain al-Abidin used to do. They are not puppets for the West anymore. And they cannot go against the public in their demands. So I advise the Americans to take what's happening seriously and to sit with these leaders and to take their point of view into consideration when they draft policies about the Middle East. They cannot from now on dictate upon us how the shape of politics should continue in this region. They need to take the public opinion into consideration.
Do you think Obama might feel freer to act a little bit more boldly if he gets a second term? Or do you not expect much of a change?
It works two ways. Some people might argue that he might feel free to act, but also on the other hand, a president who will be elected for a second term might be also weakened because he's going to be out very soon. Not only that, his party has vested interest in certain kind of balance, and the party might even block, major departure from certain kind of issues. So I really don't build very much on the American change in the region. I don't think that the American factor is going to be the driving factor in the relationship between the Arabs and the Israelis. I think what will be the driving factor is the dynamics in the region itself, the future of the Arab Spring, the democratic transformation in Syria and in Egypt and the neighboring countries. That might be much more important element in the future of the conflict rather than the American elections.
One last question about Western Muslim relations. Can you compare perhaps for the past decade, has it improved, gotten worse? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the West has, from 11 September, and as you know now, for more than 1 decade now, 11 years have passed, I think has gone through major mistakes in understanding what's happening in the Arab world. And that created a lot of sentimental feeling in the West and in the Arab world against each other. The Arab Spring came to give an opportunity for both parties to explore new future, because the Arab Spring put everything in perspective. And instead of the anger and the frustration of the Arabs being put in the shape of violence, like Al-Qaeda and so on and so forth, it has been put in the shape of democratic transformation. So it depends how the Western attitude will develop towards this new reality. If Europe and the States start to embrace democratization in the Arab world and support it in a proper manner without trying to block the arrival of this party and that party to power, I think we have a chance of correcting our relationship. But if we feel, and the people feel in the region, that their hope for proper democratization is going to be hijacked by international powers who will favor someone against someone else, I think that might have severe consequences against the future. So, again, the relationship between Islam and the West is an issue of politics more than an issue of religion. I think religiously, all of us stand for values, or religion stand for grand values. I don't see why should we fight amongst ourselves. But again, politics is dividing us and maybe pushes some people to use the religious rhetoric against the others.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Join us again for Global Perspectives on MTV Sports. For those of you who missed the episode, you can always watch it on webtv.lk. We hope you join us again next time. Have a great evening. Thank you.